everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an epic show ahead, but just remember, if any of you have experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can either email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com or head over to paranormalportal.net and scroll down and find the button that says Interview Me, and that'll allow you to look at a calendar of possible times and dates and find a date that works for you. Love to hear your stories, so definitely get in touch with me. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for all the love and support. Hope everything's going wonderful in your world, and I've got an amazing show lined up for you guys today. I am interviewing Rissa Miller, who is joining me today, and Rissa is one of those fantastically eclectic people with a huge background in many things, and she is an author, she's an herbalist, a seer, a storyteller, an editor. She puts out a newsletter regularly. She does ghost tours. She's a folklorist. She's got a passion for the paranormal, so we're gonna get into this right now, folks. Buckle up, we're going in. Hi Rissa, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you and your listeners.
Oh, thank you so much. And I usually start these interviews one way. I told you before, I don't can these interviews. They're organic. But there's one question I'm always dying to know that I ask everybody, and it's, how did this start for you? How did you get from Rissa the person into Rissa all of these different facets of the paranormal?
Well, there's a lot I could say to that, but sure. I will tell you where it really started for me. Everybody knows Wednesday Addams, right?
Yes.
I was that little girl who was always looking for something spooky. And it started for me because when I was 8 years old, I saw a full-bodied apparition.
Ooh.
And my parents had taken me. I grew up in a town called York, Pennsylvania, and they took me to York, England, the other White Rose city.
Oh.
And the idea was it would be a historic experience, educational. I would get to see the wall around the old city of York. And we went to dinner at a restaurant called Marmaduke's. Okay. And Marmaduke's was an Italian restaurant. There's still an Italian restaurant in that space, coincidentally. But I guess some things never change. So just for perspective, that was 42 years ago because I am 50 now. But that said, as a little 8-year-old girl, I climbed up the stairs to use the bathroom in Marmaduke's. And I looked into a room that was right next to where the restrooms were. And I saw a really sad teenage boy in very, very old-fashioned clothing. And I wasn't scared. I didn't have any kind of a fear reaction. I was overwhelmed, though, with how sad and upset he was. And my instinct as a little girl was, how can I help him? What can I do? So I ran back downstairs to get my mom. And I said, Mom, there's a boy upstairs that needs help. Let's go see if we can help him. And we went up and he was gone. He had vanished. There was nobody there. And so we found a server and said there was a boy upstairs in the room by the restrooms, and he was really sad, and he seemed to be wearing a costume. And she goes, "Oh no, that was Marmaduke Buckle." So we did not know the restaurant was named after a real historic person. His name was Marmaduke Buckle, like a belt buckle.
Okay.
And he had committed suicide in that room. He had taken his own life. In his lifetime, in the 1600s in York, England, Marmaduke was a little different. Today, we would say that he was a person with special needs. He had both physical and mental challenges that made him different. But in the 1600s, people thought that meant he was practicing witchcraft.
Oh.
And in order to preserve his family, he didn't want them to be punished because of him. He decided the best solution was, unfortunately, to take his own life.
Oh.
And normally, the server went on to explain, when people saw his apparition, it was hanging from the rafters. That is not what I saw. I saw him seated in a chair, the chair that apparently they told me he would go on to use to climb up and hang himself from the rafters. But I did not see that. So Marmaduke was merciful to my little 8-year-old self and only showed me his feelings in that moment, his deep sadness that he had to make this choice in order to save his family from persecution, from superstition. But that was my first dramatic experience with the paranormal, and ever since it has been a part of my life, part of my personality. I always look for the dark edges of history, for the esoterica, for the forgotten people who linger around as spirits. I absolutely think that these are part of history and part of our shared collective experience as human beings, and sometimes animals too. So
yeah, I think that's fascinating.
Long answer to your question.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for, because, I think it's probably seems atypical to the, a lot of people out there that, well, why do you guys put so much energy and time into this weird stuff? But I'm an experiencer as well. And my journey is, I want to understand what it is I've experienced. I want to know what's going on. But I think whatever it is, it's incredibly profound, whatever we're being shown. And it means something somehow, and so I think that experience is of course both heartbreaking and intriguing, right? Because it sounds like you handled that really well, having such a profound first experience.
It just didn't occur to me as weird or scary. I was raised by a very non-conventional family, and I was never taught to be afraid of anything paranormal.
Oh, good.
They told me, like, yeah, ghosts are real and they're just doing their thing. Pay them no mind. Let them do their thing. So
I like that.
That was what I grew up thinking. And it didn't occur to me at that age to feel anything otherwise.
No, I think that's a very positive viewpoint of it. I think that we're probably, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I think that we're probably swimming in spirit. We just aren't generally aware of it from whatever our filters are, but I think they are very much a part of our world and reality, but it's just a little bit out of sight, or just a hair out of frequency with us or whatever. But that's really cool. So from that experience, how did you decide to pursue that as a big focal point of your life?
Well, I've had many focal points of my life, but you always have to have a skill set, right?
Yeah.
So I did go to film school at NYU. I learned storytelling. I've never made a movie, but it was a great education in storytelling, which led me to a career in journalism, which taught me amazing research skills. So with those two things together, storytelling and research skills, you can do just about everything. You can explain things, you can interview and talk to people. And with those two things as my foundation, I moved through lots of different manifestations of my life. I would say that the whole idea of being a tour guide also started very early. I loved the idea of understanding history. So when I was 15, I became a tour guide for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I got real comfortable talking to people early in the game. And I'm not naturally outgoing. Believe it or not, I'm naturally introverted. But I have learned to really love both talking to people in person and talking on camera. The on-camera part came later. I did have to get used to that. But I honestly am one of those people, I truly believe that if you want to acquire a skill, you can. It just takes time and practice.
Right.
So even an introvert can learn to do public speaking if they want to.
And then that's very much the case for me. Like privately, I'm content. Of course, I have a family and a community around me, but I'm generally a hermit in a lot of ways too. And I think that surprises people to hear that, for people like us that are very much projecting ourselves into their experience, that it's like, what do you mean you're shy and quiet. It seems very foreign, but now speaking of ghosts, I guess my big question is, what do you think is going on with this phenomena? Do you think these are presences, robust presences, or do you think that they're an imprint of a history, a living history perhaps, or what do you think?
Yes, both.
Okay, fair enough.
So I think I really like the physics answer to the residual, that they are a scar on time-space. That makes a lot of sense to me, and it also explains why they don't move with us. So think of Gettysburg, for example. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania is not too far from where I am today, and it's a place that's steeped in tragedy from that one battle that was only a few days, but dramatic. Yeah. And there was so much residual energy laid down by what happened there. They have interactive and residual ghosts there, of course, but the residuals have such a huge presence. And I think there are several reasons for this, but the idea of scarring time-space with an emotional imprint is just something that seems logical. Yeah. And especially in a place like that, where you have the limestone and the bedrock to hold it, right? So when you think about somewhere that great tragedy or even great happiness has happened, these emotional imprints just get laid down, in my opinion, in my experience. But then they don't move. It's kind of like, I have this scar on my hand right here. It's from a curling iron. It's not really ever going to change. It's going to be here on my thumb until the day I stop using this body. And it's the same with these imprints. They don't move up when the building moves up. They don't change where they are because we added a wall or an elevator or whatever else. They keep doing the same thing in the same spot. Now, an intelligent spirit, an interactive, does change what they do. They have an awareness. They see us, hear us, know us, the way we all know each other. And it makes sense that you have this differentiation between the two. I have interviewed people with residuals in their buildings that find them terrifying. And I love to be able to comfort them by explaining, like, this is a residual. They're not going to change. They're never going to look at you. They're never going to address you. They're never going to, like, pick up your stuff and move it around the house. That's not the nature of a residual. You're going to come and go, and they're going to stay right there doing the exact same thing, and they don't have a sense of awareness about your presence. And some of the residuals I've collected stories about might be unnerving. I think one of my favorite residual stories I collected in Pennsylvania. It was from an apartment complex. Okay. And sadly, somebody moved into this apartment where one of the members of the couple that were there before died tragically in an accident. But he continued to come home every day, walk in their front door and say, "I'm home." And they moved into this apartment, and every day they heard a man come in around 5:30 and say, "I'm home." Wow. And the woman I interviewed, she's like, "I just got used to it after a while. I just was like, oh, okay, hi," you know.
That's fascinating.
But yeah, it's a fascinating thing that energy would remain after the gentleman passed in an accident, that he was still coming home to his beloved every day, even though she was no longer there. It was somebody else. And I tried to, and she was like, you know, at first I was really unnerved because I was like, who's this man? Who's here? You know, and that's a reasonable reaction. If you're a woman living alone and you hear a man's voice suddenly say, "I'm home," it could be a little scary. Sure. But she found out eventually what had happened by talking to neighbors.
Oh, okay. And this was this was an auditory phenomenon. Like she could just hear it. Wow. That's really powerful still, though, isn't it?
It is, and it's fresh. I mean, that story is not an old one. That happened, I would say, in the past 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. I always wonder about stuff like that because I wonder if it's, and I guess the only relatable thing that most of us can think of is electricity. Like there's a battery that has a charge, and it'll continue to do what it can do for as long as that charge is there. But this stuff just seems timeless, right? Or do you think that it does eventually wear down for these residual imprints?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I have an answer because
Sure.
some residuals are really old. Like Marmaduke was from the 1600s.
That's true, yeah.
And apparently he didn't roam around the building. He always appeared in that same room, sitting on his chair and then climbing up on it and then doing the deed of ending his life. He always did the same thing. That sounds residual to me. But that's a long time. That's over 400 years now that since he died. So how long will that stay there? I have no idea. Gettysburg was quite a number of years ago too, and reports come in almost daily from that place of people who still see soldiers on the battlefield or walking through walls or doing things in buildings that aren't there.
Right.
So that's a long time ago too. But the apartment complex in Pennsylvania, that just happened. And it doesn't sound as powerful to me as a full-bodied apparition. And I do think what you said earlier, actually we might have been off camera, was correct. Certain people perceive differently.
Yes. Yeah.
And could it be that someone else living in that apartment would see this man coming and going every day? I don't know.
Yeah, good point.
Or some people wouldn't hear him at all. I don't know. So, but yeah, she realized that he wasn't malevolent. He wasn't out to get her. He wasn't even going to interact with her. He would never talk, no matter what she said. It didn't matter how she placed the furniture. It just, the voice came through the front door, and that was it. No footsteps, nothing moving. It just was what it was.
Wow.
So, again, maybe that was like his happiest point of his day when he came home, you know?
I think you're probably right. And certainly oftentimes we attribute these impressions with trauma or horrible events, but sometimes it can be just normal events that happen repeatedly. I think you're absolutely right. Getting back to the Marmaduke story, you've implied that was a residual event and not necessarily an intelligent haunt, but what I find intriguing is the fact that for you, the event happened with a seated boy. So it does seem intelligent in a way, too. Do you think that it's both there, or what is your take on that?
That's a great question. And I've thought about that a lot with that particular experience. Like, why didn't I see what most people saw in that experience? Like, most people see him after he's ended his life.
Yeah.
I didn't. I saw him thinking about it right beforehand. And what could it be that the tape, if you will, started playing and I walked away in it?
Oh,
maybe.
Okay, maybe that's a good point. Yeah,
maybe because apparently people who've seen the whole sequence do see the same beginning I saw, but then they see him climb up on the chair, throw the rope, and finish the job. Unfortunately, was that while I went to go get my mom and the waitress? Maybe. We'll never really know.
Sure.
I haven't been back. I'd love to one day, but I haven't been back.
Yeah, and you're right. That's maybe a divine intervention of sorts, because I can imagine what seeing that as a young child, that act being performed or replayed, how much trauma that could be. But it's certainly not what you'd wish on any kid. So
exactly.
I'm really glad that you walked down and got your mom.
Yeah. Well, my whole life, I always know when I'm outmatched and I need help to help someone. And I guess that's the thing my parents taught me too. If somebody needs help, go get help. And that's exactly what I was doing in that moment. I didn't know that we couldn't help him.
Yeah. And you didn't know it wasn't a person, right? I mean, it was
exactly. I just thought it was somebody in a costume. Yeah. I thought it was kind of odd that somebody would be up there in a costume, but he wasn't ethereal.
Okay.
So
that's really interesting. So how did you become involved or interested in the cryptozoological portion of the strange and unusual?
So, in all honesty, I have not experienced a cryptid myself, but in my time working in, what do you want to call it, the ghost business? Is that Is that a business?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it, but it I guess it is. I found that people who have experiences are looking for a compassionate place to talk about it. And that is not just hauntings. It can be hauntings. There's a lot of that too. But cryptids and UFOs definitely fall into the category of my friends think I'm crazy. My colleagues at work laugh at me. People tell me that I made it up or I'm trying to get attention or whatever. And in the meantime, what I have experienced with a lot of folks who come talk to me is that they are genuinely distressed. They are disturbed. Their reality is bent. They don't know how to explain what they saw, heard, or experienced. And way more people have this happen to them than I think we talk about openly. So often we get tagged with, oh, you've seen a ghost. You made it up. You're crazy. You're silly. You believe, or it becomes like, oh, you worship the devil. Like,
right.
No, none of that. None of that, actually. A couple of years back, I believe it was USA Today did a survey, and they found that over 50% of Americans will tell USA Today in a survey that they've had a supernatural experience. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that covers all categories of supernatural experiences, but that's a lot. That's a lot willing to tell one of the largest news outlets in the country, Gannett, that they have had a supernatural experience. Right. So that as a pivot point would tell me that more people than not have had an experience with a haunting, with a cryptid, with an unidentified flying object, or some other form of the supernatural. I mean, there are other things too we haven't even touched. But all of that said, I feel like the stigma attached to it is unfortunate because it makes most people invalidate themselves. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, those other people I've talked to, in the past month, I've taken two, I don't know if it's Dogman or Werewolf reports, but that said, I've taken two. And both of the women I talked to couldn't sleep, couldn't go forward with their normal lives. One of them had a traumatized pet that was involved in the encounter. One was afraid to talk to her children about what she saw because she didn't want them to have nightmares. So there's a level associated with these experiences too that deeply trouble and traumatize these witnesses. And I think adding to it by telling them they're crazy or they're making it up just makes it worse. You know, that's no different than telling an abuse victim, like, you're making it up. Yeah. Like, no, that's not helpful. Stop. Right. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And that brings up a interesting point for me. And I want to ask you this because you're an archivist of sorts, taking these reports and cataloging them and just, of course, raising people's awareness. But do you think that there is more of this stuff happening now, or do you think it's more akin to people feeling that they're able to have the conversation more than ever before? In other words, the amount of experiences are the same, but the ability of people to share them has expanded. What do you think is going on?
I think that the ability of people to share them has expanded. So I think there are a couple of reasons that that's happening. Mm-hmm. So first, I'm going to say ghostly experiences go back to ancient Egypt. They were recorded in hieroglyphics, right? Mm-hmm. So I recently saw in a museum a Roman vase with a ghost on it. People have like a see-through ghost. So people have been having and recording these experiences since there were people. I mean, the werewolf story goes back to 3000 BC, something like that. So it is our oldest monster. Vampires are almost as old. So people have been experiencing things they can't explain for a long time. And science has come along and helped us explain a lot. But not everything. Science doesn't know everything yet. And scientists are probably spread pretty thin these days too. Yeah. You know? All of that said, I feel as though the technology has evolved to a point where those of us who are involved with, you know, paranormal world have so many more ways to communicate than we used to. We have YouTube, we have podcasts, we have social media. I mean, before there were blogs for a while, and that opened a lot of doors. We had newsletters and magazines before that. So each of these technological advances has created a safe space, again, another safe space, another safe space, a bigger safe space for people to share their experiences. And I think that the judgment level is still pretty high. You know, even on my ghost tours, I'll have people who are staunchly standing there with their arms crossed, like, I don't believe. And I'm like, okay, you do you. You know, enjoy the history part of the tour, I guess, you know, but like you saw something like, why are you here? You know, but, you know, whatever people do. Sure. But that said, I think that if you look back throughout history, there have always been stories that things that can't get explained away. And that even with all of our technology, there are things we still can't explain away.
That's interesting. I would say that I think the public perception or acceptability of this stuff has certainly transitioned through the generations as well, because I think our forebears were much more open to the idea that something might be haunted, or there might be, you know, wild men running in the wilderness or whatever. I mean, it wasn't unheard of to have reports in newspapers of those things. Like it was, and it still seems to be a common practice in like Hispanic countries. Seem to really embrace the spiritual and the esoteric aspects more so than our traditional or our current Western thinking. Although I'm really glad to see that it's opening back up again. But I forgot where it's going with this. But I think that I guess the point being that back in the day, if you said, "Oh, there's a wraith in my barn," well, people may come together and church communities might rally around that and try to help you out or something. But, you know, for quite some time, if you were the guy going, oh, there's a ghost in my attic, be like, okay, time for your meds. You know? That perception has certainly shifted, and now I'm glad to see that it's opening back up. But I think, I really think that probably most everybody probably has experiences. It's just that they're not so sure they want to be that guy or that woman and open themselves up to that, you know, I guess, speculation.
Absolutely.
Do you think that that this is a good trend that we're having these discussions?
I do.
Yeah.
And let me sort out my brain for a second.
Sure.
So I think that especially considering the fact that people in general are becoming more and more apart. Like we're physically apart now because of technology, but also the idea of a community, the idea of working together is becoming, unfortunately, more and more of a foreign idea. Mm-hmm. Like, not foreign like another country, foreign like we just don't do it anymore. And I think that anything that builds a sense of safe community is a good thing. So like your podcast right now, there could be somebody listening to us talk and they are thinking like, oh, these people get it. These people know what I saw. They know why I don't talk about it. They know why I still have nightmares about it 3 years later. And all of that said, it's just created a safe space for them. And maybe one day you get an email from them, or I do, or whatever, or somebody else does, because they've finally found a way to feel okay with themselves and not be like, okay, I probably need therapy, you know, to be like, oh, well, science says that ghosts aren't real, so how can I reconcile my experience?
Right.
You know, I think that seeing more and more normalizing ghosts, normalizing all of these experiences is a positive thing. Are there people who would abuse the system? Of course. Always. That's always a thing.
Oh, sure.
I mean, we can sit here and talk about accounting, and there's somebody who's going to abuse the system. You know, that's like the most boring thing I can think of. No offense to any of your accountant listeners, but let's be honest. Like that's not a super fascinating thing, and yet there are still definitely people who can abuse that system too.
Sure.
A truly troubled person is who's going to abuse the system.
Right.
Somebody who's trepidatious to come forward, who only wants their initials used, or not even that. That isn't the person who's out to abuse the system. That's the person who wants to contribute their story to the greater good and help others feel normal, help others feel safe again.
Yeah, and I think
Did I answer your question, Brent?
No, you're doing great. I'm just fascinated with what you're saying, and I agree. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to through the years. They're like, and it's usually after the recording is done. It's like this sigh of relief that escapes them. It's like, oh, I've been carrying this for so many years. It feels so good to finally talk, because I think people have this incredibly isolated kind of impression of what happened and who can I share it. I mean, if your car breaks down, you can go to talk to anybody about it and be like, yeah, this is really on my mind, or even relationship problems or whatever. But who do you go to say, man, I saw a face in my window of this ape thing and I don't know what to do. I mean, these people are stuck in this state of trauma that they can't express or didn't know that they could express. And then somehow through their journey, they find a person like yourself or myself, and they share it, and it becomes this incredibly cathartic experience for them. And it feels really good to help facilitate that and to give them a place to do that. And then it's also that somebody out there listening, like you mentioned, will hear that and go, oh, well, that's kind of like my experience. Maybe I should talk about what I experienced. And I think these releases are really important because these are life-changing events for most people. Like, it changes the world that they understand and know. And suddenly they're in this foreign alien experience they don't know how to process. So I think these communities are incredibly powerful and important. So that's really cool.
Especially I've had a lot of people, because I worked sometimes in Pennsylvania and sometimes in Maryland. And in Maryland, you run into a lot of government employees and scientists who work at places like NASA. And I've had people come and talk to me like, I would lose my job if anybody heard me say this.
Right.
Or I have top secret clearance. But also, I saw a dog man in broad daylight.
Wow.
And they talk about, this particular person I'm thinking of told me they could not bend their brain around the fact that this thing walked right in front of their car in daylight, 2 PM, stopped, looked at them, and then casually walked the rest of the way across the street. They were so stunned. Of course, they didn't think to pick up their cell phone. So this was like back in 2014 or 15. So cell phones the pictures were real bad back then.
Yeah.
But they literally just sat there until another car drove by several minutes later because they couldn't wrap their brain around what they just saw. Right. I went through all the usual questions like, were you drinking? Were you on any medication? Did you recently watch a scary werewolf movie? Like, no, none of these things. This was the middle of the afternoon. They were, on the way to visit family and did not expect this creature to just walk out. They slam on the brakes. It's casual. The thing's like, whatever,
Wow.
And they were struck with its intelligence, its confidence. And I say, could it have been a teenager in an outfit? And they were like, absolutely not.
Wow.
It was too tall. It was too confident. It had way too much grace and swagger. And I've heard other people describe them that way too.
Yes.
The intelligence, the grace, the fluidity of their movements. And it's fascinating. And this person held on to this story for like a decade before talking about it with me. Waited until everybody had left my tour that night. So they were the last person standing. Wow. And then share the story. So yeah, I think that, and again, they also told me that they continued to dream about it. They kept looking, they went back to that road and went back and forth, and they looked for footprints, never found anything.
Sure.
And the most recent story I took about a dog man encounter was a woman who's in medical. And she said, I'm not a believer. I don't follow any supernatural programs. I don't watch scary movies. I don't read scary books. And she's like, yeah, I know what I saw. I know what was out there.
Right.
And she was like, I had a mag light right on it. Like right on it. and it didn't flinch or run away. She goes, if it were a wild coyote, it would have run.
Right.
But it didn't.
That is so amazing. And that's another perplexing characteristic of these cryptids. And I would love for your feedback on this, because it's puzzling to me. I really can't quite work out what is going on here, because by all accounts and measures, these are beings, whether they're completely physical or somehow, with a foot in both worlds kind of idea. And there's lots of speculation about what they are. But they clearly have chosen to be away from us, to be secluded from us, to, not let us into their experience in any way. But then there's stories like the one you just shared. It's like, obviously it could have just hunkered down and the guy would have went by, or the woman, and then crossed when nobody was coming. But it shows that moment. And I try to understand the psychology, because it's like, why? And it almost, as you suggested, there is an intelligence at work there. So I don't know if it's something more esoteric, where they just think that, or for whatever reason, they need to show themselves to you. But it is very conscious. It's not accidental. What do you think is going on? It does seem
that way.
Yeah, what do you think is that?
So I obviously don't know the answer.
Sure, yeah.
I wish I did.
Right.
Well, wouldn't that be cool? I could solve so many things for so many people if I knew.
Sure.
But I can only speculate and give you my opinion.
Right. That's all I'm asking for.
I think that, they're always described as confident.
Mm.
And that's from any story I've ever heard anywhere. They always have this supreme intelligence and confidence. I don't think they're at all intimidated by us.
Okay.
I don't think they don't believe they have any reason to fear us. So most other animals know that they have to fear us, because we're unpredictable and we have guns.
Right.
But these things clearly don't worry about that. So either they're not affected by our guns or whatever we have to throw at them, so they know they're safe. Does that make them supernatural? I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But I've never heard an account of somebody's bullet taking one down.
No, that's true. For the dog
even
man.
when they hit them, they don't seem to go down.
Right.
They don't seem to leave a blood trail. So that said, they are clearly not the same as us.
Right. Fair enough.
So they are in some way a different life form, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I don't know that I would necessarily say they're like UFOs. I don't think that's the case. I think it's probably more likely to go with Einstein's theory of multiple dimensions. That seems, of everything I've read, that is the thing that I love logic, by the way. You can tell I used to be a reporter. I'm like, what is the thing that makes the most sense logically?
Right.
That is the theory to me, personally, that makes the most sense.
Sure.
That, as Einstein proposed, there are multiple dimensions and there are portals in between. Mm-hmm. Now, we're way too busy with our lives to think about that. Just taking care of a house and a family and a job and a car, and then worrying about, am I eating the right things? Like, am I getting enough B12? Like, all of the things that take up our brains keep us from things like being grounded and centered enough to feel a portal in nature. I just don't think that 99.9% of us are capable of that, because we're too preoccupied with our human lives. Mm-hmm. And that's fine, and I'm not criticizing that at all. But these creatures are not preoccupied with their human lives. And I have heard reports of them taking down deer and farm animals. So clearly, they must have some need to eat. Mm-hmm. I'm sure wherever they come from, they can probably get deer or sheep there. But sometimes they come here. I can't explain why. I know the theory that they could be nature guardians. But then why aren't they, showing up at the EPA? I don't know. But
good point.
I mean, seriously, like if that is their purpose, there are way more effective ways to go about it than creeping around on farms and woods, scaring people. Just saying, But I would love to believe that they're nature spirits or nature guardians. Sure. But honestly, if that's the case, they need to work harder. But because our natural lands are just dwindling rapidly, and if that's their environment, get active, do something.
Yeah.
But I think that could be another reason, by the way, that we're seeing more and more of these things. A, we're more connected to each other and these stories are being shared, but also our natural lands are dwindling as there gets to be more and more,
development,
housing developments and condos, and certain parts of land just get depleted. And then, we put in more Starbucks and everything else. Yeah. It just gets to be, there's just less and less and less space for them. Just like there's less and less space for deer or elk or whatever else. So this is one of those logical things to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think even 100 years ago, there was a lot more wild land.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think you're right. I think that certainly our expansion and encroachment onto these natural places are pushing them more and more into our experience. Because they may have ancestral routes that have gone for tens of thousands of years that now have, a freeway in the middle of it or something like that. So, yeah, right. I mean, eventually somebody's going to see something, I suppose. But it does seem like they do want to be seen. And I just think that is fascinating. And I like what you said, like the confidence and their regard for us is, oh, there's one of those bald monkeys. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
It is interesting, the other thing about and this is something that's really kind of cooked my bacon through the years too. And maybe by virtue of them possibly being a multi-dimensional or phase of reality kind of creature, that might explain a lot. But I always found it fascinating, for the topic of Bigfoot, it's a global phenomenon. I mean, there are names all over the planet for these hairy, huge hominid, primate, humanoid creatures. But what fascinates me is that, obviously at some point there must have been a common ancestor somewhere. However, they expanded, somehow migrated to cover the globe, and yet so they would have been separated for I guess at least tens of thousands of years. But what I find fascinating is that even in light of that separation, it's almost a carbon copy. If somebody's explaining the behavior of a yowie or a grass man in Ohio or a skunk ape or an Alma or Yeren in China, or it's the same behaviors. It's like whatever it is, that there's such a consistency. Even the way that people have heard them talk or use what's believed to be language, it's almost a carbon copy. So I don't know, maybe I'm reading way more into this, but I find it fascinating because, of course, in human experience, our cultures split and went to different parts of the globe, and yet we have profound differences between us and our culture there are some things that are obviously very rudimentarily the same. We all eat, we all need shelter, sleep, heat, all that stuff, but I don't know that we would be necessarily carbon copies of each other. So what do you make of that? And again, speculation.
The one spot I'm gonna head back for a moment to you talking about language.
Yes.
We are not great with language as humans. We have lots of different languages we know, but most of us don't know more than two, or very few people I know more than two languages. And we definitely don't understand the language patterns of animals. We just don't. There was a fascinating book I read where some linguists actually recorded prairie dogs, and it turns out they have language. They have names. And we didn't know until these scientists studied them. Now, could it be that our dogs and cats have language and we just don't get it? Probably. So these languages that are being used by a creature like Bigfoot, we just don't know it.
Right.
So it's really easy to write it off and discredit it or say oh, it's just grunting. Is it? Yeah. Or do you just not understand it?
Right.
Yeah. Are you missing it? Probably you're missing it, because if prairie dogs have names and language, I bet something that big with a brain that large absolutely has a language.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, there's no two ways about it. I mean, I think that the natural world has so much more to it than we understand. I remember also reading an article about how one of the reasons they use horses for therapy is because when you get near it, your heartbeat slows down to the heartbeat of the horse. Oh. And so that's one reason they're so great at calming children. It makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
And because they have that slow, steady heartbeat, and it creates a sense of calm and rhythm. So if we've only recently figured this out about horses and we've been with them, they helped us create civilization for thousands of years. What else don't we know?
Yeah.
A lot. There's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot we take for granted as human beings. So when you're thinking about the animal kingdom, and I'm going to include cryptids in that, I feel like we are making assumptions about things we couldn't possibly understand. Unfortunately, we humans are real slow learners. We just are.
Sure.
And we tend to repeat our mistakes a lot before we get it. So I think that the idea of understanding the purpose of a Bigfoot, it's not going to come until we can understand a little bit of its language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it can't tell us what it's doing until we can hear it.
Right.
You know, will it be some brilliant future generation that finally gets it? I hope.
Yeah,
You know?
I hope so too. I keep hoping that maybe AI can help crack some of this stuff. I mean, obviously there's plenty of people nervous about AI, but I think it's a marvelous tool that opens up a lot
It
of
is a great
possibilities.
tool.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to put out there for people that I took a class on AI, and it's been in all of our phones for almost a decade. So if you're scared of it, it's already here. You've already been using it. It's literally in refrigerators, you know, so.
Oh, I did not know that. I mean, of course, but they didn't tell us either, right? So,
No, they didn't.
Right.
But it's a tool we've been using for years.
Oh, that's
So-
brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought there was something going on with my phone. Like I can be having a conversation about something obscure with a acquaintance or friend of mine, and suddenly things start popping up on my phone with that in
Yes.
it, and it's like,
Yes.
wow, I really wasn't
Yeah.
that.
I was recently I was talking to my housemate about recipes for Brussels sprouts, and my phone just sitting there. It's like, would you like some recipes for Brussels sprouts? I was like, oh, that's so helpful. Thank you.
No,
That's great. You're right on top of things.
Yeah, it's like having a personal assistant, I guess. I'm not one of those really. Some people are really truly worried about that, but I think that the capabilities and what that will bring to the table in order to help us kind of unlock some of these keys of the universe is profound. And in fact, I think they've been using AI to examine a lot of these potential languages of animals, and I think it's a great possibility and application, because can you imagine that if we all were little Dr. Doolittles, we could just go out inside and talk to the sparrows or whatever, and
That would be amazing. I'm sure they would have incredible insights. Imagine talking to something that can fly.
I know, there's shamanic traditions that claim that very thing, and I find that really fascinating, and some surprising insights that I was talking with the ravens, and they said, and there's no way this guy could have known because of where he's located versus where these people were, but the chain of information comes. And so I wanted to touch on, if you don't mind, quickly. I know we're kind of burning through the episode here, but it's been a phenomenal discussion. But what do you think of the mind speak?
What do I think? So generally speaking, I know that we don't use our whole brains, right?
Sure.
We don't even know how yet. And I think that the idea of greater communication through our minds is totally possible.
Yes.
Totally a real thing. And I know that a lot of major research universities have already delved into it a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Not recently. I mean, right now those places are fighting to stay open.
Yeah.
But super weird, I know. But in the past, there have been so many different ideas and studies into that topic that to me, it was enough to make it seem real and doable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also opens the idea that communicating with ghosts who are on another dimension, or another level, or cryptids who are like coming and going through other dimensional portals seems much more real.
Yeah.
And I even have talked a few times with a psychic who's very talented, and he believes that there are other beings in the universe, and that when you are quiet enough in your mind and you get rid of like all the huge list of things that I already discussed that like occupy our brains, you can hear them.
Oh,
You can
neat.
talk with them, interact with them psychically, I guess. And so I'm personally open to the idea. I know there's so much more of our brains that we don't use. We don't even understand how our brains work, never mind what they can do.
Yeah.
So, it's like saying we understand what's in the ocean. We don't. We don't know what's down there. We also don't know what's down here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And I'm excited by the journey that we're on. I think it's exceptionally interesting time in the history of humankind that I think there's so much emerging, and maybe at a reckless, maybe bad pace, because we're being introduced to so many new things at such a breakneck speed.
That is true. Except for the Industrial Revolution, there's been no time like this in history.
Right. Yeah. But I would love to think that maybe we're going to unlock some of these mysteries of all time and all space, and maybe hopefully we expand with it. That's the only fear that I have, because I think that, an old example I used to use a long time ago is like a little bit of information can be dangerous.
Absolutely.
In other words, like you don't need
just enough to be dangerous.
Right.
I always say that about certain topics. Like if somebody asks me about numerology, I'll say, I know just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Like I probably can't answer your numerology question.
Yeah. Like you don't need to know how to build a hand grenade. You just need to know pull a pin and throw. Like that's a little bit of information, but it can cause a whole lot of problems. And
exactly.
So I hope that we get the wisdom that should come with that and in a really good way. But I've really loved talking to you, Rissa. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Me.
This has been fascinating. And I love that you're okay talking about this whole broad spectrum of things, because this is how my mind works. It's kind of a scary place in here, but I really enjoyed talking to you and throwing these ideas back and forth, because I think we're all on that journey of trying to understand, anything and everything. And certainly these are some huge questions in, not only my mind, but I'm sure my community's mind. So I appreciate you taking the time to share your insights.
Of course. And thank you for having me. My final thought for you will be, there are things that if we look back in history used to be mysterious to us that we understand now. Like germ theory, for example. We didn't used to understand what viruses and bacteria were, and we thought it was magic. And I think that as we keep going, things will be less magic and more understandable.
Yeah, I sure hope so. Can you take a couple minutes and let people know how to stay in touch with you?
Sure. So if you want to find me, I have two different websites. One is teaandsmoke.com. All those words are spelled out. You can find me there doing tea leaf reading and smoke scrying and a little bit about my events. And if you're extra spooky, I have a website called hauntedpa.online, and it outlines all my ghost tours and spooky esoteric lectures that I give.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you again for being here. I hope you'll come back and we can dive even further into these rabbit holes.
I would love to. That sounds great.
All right, Rissa, thank you so much. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So hope you guys enjoyed the show, and thank you again so much for all your love and support. And remember, if you want to follow the Paranormal Portal, probably the easiest way is to head over to paranormalportal.net. And that's the homepage for the Paranormal Portal. And you'll find links to all of our different social media and sites and information about the shows, including our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/paranormalportal. Or just look for Paranormal Portal on Google or whatever search engine, and you'll find links to our social media such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So we're kind of all over the place, and we're spreading as well as we can. But anyway, thank you so much for the love and support. Y'all take care, and remember, we love y'all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. Until next time.